Outrageous. That's how U.S. President Joe Biden described the International Criminal Court prosecutor seeking arrest warrants for Israeli and Hamas leaders. Biden is promising to stand with Israel. Meanwhile, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has condemned the move against him as a moral outrage of historic proportions. He has vowed to continue with what he insists is a just war against Hamas. DD India's Benji Haya has more from Washington, D.C.
Well, this is a rather forthright denouncement from the Biden administration, a quote, a fundamental rejection of what officials here call the ICC's shameless push for arrest warrants for both Benjamin Netanyahu and Israel's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant over war crimes and crimes against humanity in Gaza.
Let me be clear. We reject the ICC's application for arrest warrants against Israeli leaders. Whatever these warrants may imply, there is no equivalence between Israel and Hamas. And it's clear Israel wants to do all it can to ensure civilian protection. But let me be clear. Contrary to allegations against Israel made by the International Court of Justice, what's happening is not genocide. We reject that. We're going to always stand with Israel and the threats against its security.
You have to hear this to believe this. The International Criminal Court in The Hague is contemplating issuing arrest warrants against senior Israeli government and military officials as war criminals. This would be an outrage of historic proportions. International bodies like the ICC arose in the wake of the Holocaust committed against the Jewish people. They were set up to prevent such horrors, to prevent future genocides.
A panel of pre-trial judges will now determine whether the evidence supports the issuing of warrants against those two politicians, as well as against Hamas's leader, Yahya Sinwar, for his and others' involvement in the deadly October 7th attack. But the White House is claiming this move by the ICC could jeopardize ceasefire efforts, and it risks creating an equivalence between Israel, its Middle East ally, and Hamas, a group the US designates as terrorists. Washington also says the court has no jurisdiction over the matter. If warrants are granted, countries signed up to the ICC statute would be obliged to arrest the men if they set foot on their soil. That doesn't include Israel nor the United States, which don't conform to the statute.
I can also confirm today that I have reasonable grounds to believe, on the basis of evidence collected and examined by my office, that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Minister of Defense Yoav Gallant bear criminal responsibility for the following international crimes committed on the territory of the State of Palestine from at least the 8th of October 2023.
Israel, according to US Secretary of State Antony Blinken, was actually prepared to cooperate with the court's prosecutor, who is scheduled to visit Israel as early as next week to discuss the investigation. His staff were meant to land in Israel hours ago to coordinate that visit. Yet Israel was informed that they didn't board their flight just at the same time as their boss took to the airwaves to announce the charges, a timeline which the US State Department says undermines the legitimacy and the credibility of this investigation. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan just returned from Israel and the Palestinian West Bank for talks, urging a political solution to the war. And despite the stern reaction we've heard stateside, this ICC decision could increase the pressure on the US to draw back its support of Israel. Benji Haya in Washington, reporting for DD India.
All right, joining me from Tel Aviv in Israel is my colleague Sarah Coates. Sarah, Netanyahu calls it absurd and the new anti-Semitism. Tell us more.
He's also calling it a complete distortion of reality, scandalous, saying that nothing will stop me or us. Now, we're really seeing furious reactions coming in from right across the political spectrum here in Israel. The Foreign Minister, Israel Katz, he says that this is an unrestrained attack on the victims of October 7 and also the hostages that are still being held in the Gaza Strip. Now, he has instructed the Israeli Foreign Ministry to open a situation room to deal with this and to really focus on fighting these charges, while Israel has over the last few hours been reaching out to its key allies like the United States. And we heard some of Biden's responses there in Benji's report. Biden has declared that Israel's military operation in the Gaza Strip is not genocide, but it is important to point out here that the ICC's chief prosecutor, Karim Khan, he didn't actually level this accusation of genocide at Israel. This is something that we've been hearing from certain aid groups and also other countries like South Africa who are bringing a separate case against Israel at the ICJ. So certainly right now, what we are expecting here in Israel are some very high-level meetings between top officials and lawyers as they try and work out a strategy going forward. But really, Ramesh, what this has done in a period of real disrupt around the country, we've been seeing many divisions, it is now uniting the country.
Also, Sarah, in the meantime, are Israel's military operations continuing in Gaza?
They certainly are. The Israeli military says that over the past 24 hours, it has hit some 70 targets. These are things like weapons storage facilities, also rocket launchers belonging to Hamas and other Palestinian factions like Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Now, we can report that heavy fighting is continuing right across the Strip. We're talking about Jabalia up in the north, even Beit Lahia a little further north of Jabalia, also the centre of the Strip along that Netzarim corridor, and down in this southern region, Rafah, which we all know was up until fairly recently declared a safe zone. Now, it was yesterday that the Israeli military came out to say that already some 950,000 internally displaced Palestinians, that they have now fled Rafah. They've gone to other evacuation zones like Al-Mawasi on the coast, but people on the ground, they say simply nowhere is safe in the Gaza Strip. And Ramesh, just fairly briefly,
Sure.
We do need to also point out that there's a rather large military operation ongoing right now in the West Bank city of Jenin. According to the Palestinian Health Ministry there, some 7 people have been killed in this raid that is ongoing. We are hearing reports of ambulances being blocked and heavy armoured bulldozers rolling in, with the IDF calling this a counter-terror operation, Ramesh.
All right, we will leave it at that. Sarah, thank you. Sarah Coates in Tel Aviv. Now, in some more news from the region, nearly 600 tons of aid have